Hi everyone, it's Michael, and it's time for the June 2020 Orchid Collection update. Today is actually the 4th of July, so I'm obviously filming this a bit late. My workload has intensified so significantly recently. I have been drowning in work, even though it's work from home, and that's absolutely not me complaining. I feel so grateful to be gainfully employed in the midst of a global pandemic, so I apologize that I have not been able to be as communicative or create as much content for you as I ordinarily would, but here I am, I'm gonna make it happen. And this month has actually been so beautiful. It is just sustaining all of the momentum from really spring. All of my plants are doing beautifully. I have so many lovely things in bloom right now and so many things that are soon to be in bloom. So just to recap, my system this month is just like it was last month. I am flushing all of the semi-hydroponic containers once to twice a month, depending. In between those flushes, I am watering with dilute nutrient solution. I am misting all of my plants in the morning and sustaining a strong source of moving air as well. I am also continuing to explore water culture. I have converted a few more of my plants to water culture. And I have to tell you, I have been flabbergasted at the ease of that process. I have been flabbergasted at how well these plants are adapting to it. Now, it's too early for me to say anything definitively, but I do think that water culture is a very agreeable grow method. I do not think it's a one size fits all. I don't think it's appropriate for every single plant. However, I really am surprised at how well a diverse assortment of plants are doing in this cultivation method. So we're gonna look at all of that together. Now, the last thing I wanted to share with you before we jump in is I created this one designated spot in my home where I keep all of the orchids in bloom, and it's just the happiest place for me, especially in the midst of such unrest. You know, it's beautiful to just kind of put together all of your little green babies and see them really shine and radiate their beauty. So I wanted to show you this little nook where I put all of my orchids in bloom before we jump in. Okay, you can't tell me that this doesn't immediately put a smile on your face. Look at all of the beauty emitting from this part of my house. And of course, we're gonna talk through the plants one by one, but you can see my wedding day Phalaenopsis orchids all in bloom and cascading downward. I've got my Dendrobium Nobile to my kids on display, my Epidemic green Hornet. Over this way, I have my NoID Oncidium that just started to bloom, my Oncidium Twinkle, which is still in bloom, my Cataleya Purple Blue Hawaii, which smells like heaven. So what I like to do is brew my coffee in the morning. I'll come and sit right here underneath the fiddle leaf fig, and I'll just take it all in, the scents, the beauty. You know, it's so remarkable that we spend so much time as orchid growers trying to get these plants to comply with our wishes, and how little time we spend celebrating the beauty that we have really nurtured. So for me, this has become a very spiritual space. It's also become a very meditative space. So if you haven't set aside a zone or a place in your home to really celebrate what you're doing, I really encourage you to do so because it is so, so good for the spirit. Now, without further lead-in, let's just go ahead and jump in and talk about the plants that have something new, different, and interesting happening this month. Jumping in with number 3 in the collection, we have my Wilsonara Aloha Sparks Halloween. And you can see this one had a beautiful display of blooms last month, but since it has dried up, and just like clockwork, as soon as it started to drop its flower buds, it invested in a brand new growth. So I do love how predictable this plant is when it is in good health. And now that it is recovering nicely, I think that we can expect a lot more beauty and a lot more blooms from it. I'm not going to unpot it, even though I feel inclined to do so, just because it does have a rotting pseudobulb on this side. It struggled for a long time, but I want it to gain a little bit more momentum. I want it to have a little bit more stability before I repot. Now moving on to number 4, I'm so excited about this because I've had this plant for years. It has never bloomed for me. When I got it, it was covered in aphids. I did the soap and alcohol treatment to it. Then beyond that, the plant fell off of the shelf and divided itself into 3. I have since given away the 2 divisions and then nursed this one back to health. But after all this time, it finally has blessed me with its beauty. And I forgot how gorgeous this one is. It's so peculiar. It's like a deep maroon with speckles of green and like little zebra stripes. Let me see if I can find a better bloom. Yeah, just take a look at that guy. So interesting, so stunning. If anyone has any insight as to what this is, it didn't come with a tag, so this is effectively a NoID Oncidium, but it grew so vigorously. And again, you can see the difference between the previous year's growths. So all of these growths were the previous year's, and then this year's growth. So I finally got it settled in a grow method that it really, really likes. I added a top dressing of sphagnum moss to coax out that root system, and then it just really ran with it. So this is super healthy, super vigorous, and I actually think the pseudobulbs can get even bigger next year if I just continue on the path that I have been on. So I am gonna do a bloom profile on this if I can find the time to film it, but I am thrilled. But again, if anyone knows or has some insights about what this could be, so I can do a little bit more research on the parentage and lineage of the plant, I would be very grateful. Now moving on to number 7 in the collection. This is my Dendrobium Nobile to my kids in full bloom. I am so excited. This plant is so, so gorgeous and just happy and lovely. And it's not even done blooming. You can see it has more blooms coming in. If I take you in closer, you can see there are even more buds developing on the plant. Now, the interesting thing about this one is I've had this for years. It typically gives me 1 to 2 blooms in January to announce that it's time, like when the buds start to form, I know it's time to resume watering after dormancy, and then it will bloom fully in March. But for whatever reason, this waited until May to really create its full blooms. And I don't know if the transition to San Francisco has something to do with it. Maybe there are cooler temperatures that, you know, incited a slower bloom process. I'm not really sure what happened, but I'm just so excited because I thought it wasn't going to go into full bloom this year, but it totally did. So exciting. Jumping to number 11, I just love this plant so much. My Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos. Look how, I mean, the modeling on the leaves, first of all, is just breathtaking. It is such a beautiful plant. But what I really wanted to showcase is kind of the process and the timeline of the bloom. So again, this is a sequential bloomer, and you can see this bloom has dried up. It dried up about 2 weeks ago, and when I filmed last month's orchid collection update, it had just opened. So each bloom will last a period of about a week and a half to 2 weeks, but you can see 3 generations of bloom right now. It's so interesting because you can see the one that has already bloomed and died. You can see the bloom that's about to open. It's actually starting to open today. If I can get in closer, you'll see it's just starting to open its petals. So, so interesting. But right behind it, do you see that little, it looks like just a little sharp claw? That is the incoming flower spike. So it's interesting because between the first time this ever bloomed for me, it took maybe about a month to create the second bloom. But now that it's kind of getting in the rhythm of sequential blooming, it seems to be happening faster. That could just be perception, maybe it's just an anomaly, but I do think it's pretty remarkable and very, very cool. So I'm excited to see this beauty in bloom again. If you want to see more about this plant, go ahead and click the bloom profile playlist that I have below. It'll show you all of the plants that I've already filmed bloom profiles for. Now moving to number 12 in the collection, this is my Phalaenopsis Ox Lottery Prince. And what I wanted to showcase here is this one is blooming again off of an old flower spike. Now it's unlike me to leave a flower spike intact after the first round of blooms because the plant will not bloom as prolifically. I don't even know if that's a real word. It will not bloom with as much intensity as it would if you clip off the spike and allow it to start over. But this one, you know, typically the plant will make the choice for you too. You'll find that a lot of Phalaenopsis, once they bloom, the flower spike will just immediately dry up. But this one didn't, and I just wanted to kind of watch it and see what would happen, and it never dried up, and then maybe 3 months later, it bloomed off of the tip of where the previous spike had bloomed. So I'm excited to see this in bloom again. You know, it's a shame it's only three buds, and I do think that that's kind of my rationale, my reasoning for why I do prefer to just clip back the flower spike and allow it to create a brand new, more robust display. But even so, I'm just very excited to see this in such good health and bloom again. And actually, while it's generating these buds, it's also generating a new leaf inside, which is pretty interesting as well. So this one's a multitasker. Oh, and number 7 is also a multitasker because you can see it's in bloom, it's creating blooms, and it's also creating a new growth, which is right here. So, moving on to number 16, you are just so unruly, but I kind of like it now. This is my Catasetum Dapper Dots Nicolasa Tavares. Does this not stress you out? Look how gigantic and absurd this plant is. It 1000% has to be divided. It's just got too much going on. And just to give you a point of reference, like look how, I don't know if disorganized is the right word, but look how disorganized and kind of outrageous / wild this plant is. And then you compare it to the other Catasetum type I have represented in my collection, which is my Fred Clarkiara After Dark SPO Black Pearl. And look at the growth on that one. Just so upright, so lovely, so controlled, but it only has 2 pseudobulbs attached to the original growth. This one is doing whatever the hell it wants because look how many growths it has from previous grow seasons. It has too much energy for its own good. It's going insane and it's very difficult to manage. The one big thing I do want to celebrate about both of my Cataseedums is they have both struggled with spider mites. It's a very common issue for that type of thin-leafed orchid. But I did manage to successfully eradicate the populations of spider mites on both plants. It took me a couple tries and it took me a couple of different methods, but I will showcase and film a video about how I treat orchids for spider mites soon because thank God, I didn't want to say anything about it or advise anything until I had really gotten it under control. And I am so pleased that they're gone. Now we're gonna jump to number 17 in the collection. This is my Ascocenda Betty May Steele Carmella. This one I had converted to water culture about 2 weeks prior to the last orchid collection update for May. Now, I want to show you what's going on because it just couldn't be happier. I think this was such a strong choice because take a look on the inside. Look at how vigorous all of this new root growth is and thick ones coming out from the base of the plant itself. But beyond that, it's branching off of its old root system as well. This has just taken so happily to water culture, and I don't think I've ever seen it quite so well established. And I will say, I'm not doing semi-water culture with this one, I'm doing full water culture. Its roots are always in contact with the water. One of the reasons I made the choice to switch it is because I'm just an inattentive grower. I forget to soak them. So I really wanted to see if I could do full water culture because it simplifies things for me and it seems to be going fantastic. So that's what I wanted to showcase there. Now moving on to number 19 in the collection, and 20 actually. These are my bulbophyllums, and these have been a bit problematic for me for the exact same reason that my Vanda types or my Vandaceous types have been problematic for me. I forget to water them as regularly as they like. I have difficulty sustaining their preference for 80% humidity. So I was kind of thinking about it and I was like, maybe these would do really well in water culture. And I realized that I could have killed them in the process, but I just decided to jump in. Specifically on my bulbophyllum fascinator, look how desiccated, look how desiccated the little bulbs are. And they were like that for quite some time. They were like that when I had them potted in sphagnum moss. They were like that when I had it potted in semi-hydroponics. Now I did get this to successfully bloom in semi-hydroponics, but those bulbs never plumped up, which is why I felt compelled to switch its grow method. But now look at it. This has never in the entirety of the time that I've had it put out a new growth, not once. And I've had this plant for years. But now, look who decided to throw out a new growth. It does seem that it is responding positively to water culture because it's not just the regular contact with the water, it's also the fact that, look at how I have it placed. It is hovering just above the water reservoir, and it's creating really significant ambient humidity within the container. So I think that it really appreciates that. And just like my bulbophyllum fascinator, my bulbophyllum ambrosia is responding in kind because you can see, and this one hasn't struggled as much. This one has put out plenty of new growths for me, but almost immediately after putting it into water culture, it spit out a brand new growth. So, you know, it does seem that these plants really appreciate water culture, which is peculiar because I've been trying to map out one common preference that they might have. So I can say, oh, this type of plant really likes water culture, but these ones don't. But the funny thing is Vandas have a notorious preference for drying out in between waterings, and look how well it's doing. And bulbophyllum have a notorious preference for staying very, very moist, and look how well they're doing. It's just, the plant is adapting to the method. It's so interesting. Now moving on to number 25, we know her, we love her. This is my Epidendrum Green Hornet. And again, what I want to showcase here is just how successfully it has been blooming sequentially. This has been in bloom for months now, and you can see it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. When I take you in, you can kind of see the growth pattern. Right at the center of the spike, it is producing another bud, and then right underneath it, yet another bud. So I don't know how long this is actually going to stay in bloom, but it has been in bloom for so long. I absolutely love it, and it's really, really exciting because these bulbs are from last year. The ones that were grown this year haven't even begun to spike, so I think that I have a lot more to look forward to from this plant. Now jumping to number 28, my old faithful, my trusty. This one brings me so much joy. It's one of my favorites, it's one of Justin's favorites, but my Cataleya Purple Blue Hawaii has just been so consistent for me. This blooms all the time. It smells absolutely divine, and it is just such a stunning little beauty. Now, this ordinarily will give me 2 to 3 blooms. The reason it didn't is because I divided it recently, but even the divisions are doing phenomenally well. So I'm super excited about this one. I just couldn't love it more, but I'm not surprised to see it in bloom because it's always very consistent. Jumping to number 29, this is my Eulaphia petersi, and I just, look at the difference, you guys. This is craziness. So I bought this with this bulb, and you can see it's kind of drying up. I sunburned the crap out of this plant when I first got it because I didn't know what I was doing. And then over the next 2 years, I managed to grow this growth, and then slightly bigger this growth. But finally, I just realized this plant doesn't like semi-hydro. It does not want regular access to a water reservoir. It's a desert-dwelling orchid. It does not like it. So I switched it to succulent/cactus mix. And now I actually don't even flush the container. What I do is when I mist my plants in the morning, I just give it a gentle mist right on top of the medium. It absorbs that water really quickly. And look how successful that has been for the growth of this plant. Like it's almost double the size of the previous year growth. And it has put down tons of new roots, which it has never done before. So yeah, another example that you can't use a one-size-fits-all approach with your orchids. This one really, really does prefer to not be in regular contact with, it does not want a water reservoir. Because even after I originally potted it into this method, I was flushing it and leaving water down here in the leca, and it didn't like that. I noticed that some of the roots were starting to rot. So I discontinued that practice. I just missed it, and it's doing phenomenally. Now moving to number 33 in the collection, this is my Dendrobium Tangerine M. And again, this one seems to, I never know if it's actually recovering or not. What's interesting is it's put out this new growth. You can see it's doing really well, and it's putting out lots and lots of new roots, which is very exciting and very positive. The problem is every new growth that this has created has developed this black scale on it. I still can't pinpoint exactly what it is, so I don't want to treat something if I don't know what the issue is. But I do think that one thing that's interesting about the new growth comparatively is look at all the old roots. The roots that it has that it's currently using are much thinner than the new roots, and you can tell the difference from the one with the green tip. The new green tip root is much thicker, it's much more robust, and it seems much better equipped in the system. In order to get the thinner roots to even grow, I had to surround this in a layer of sphagnum moss to really coax out the root system. But now that it's been coaxed out and it has a way to metabolize water, it seems to be investing in a stronger root system. So I don't know, maybe that'll help it overcome whatever this thing is. I don't know, it's all speculation at this point, but maybe it's just also wishful thinking. Now we're gonna move to number 34 in the collection. This is my Lutetia discolor. This one is so interesting. I got it to bloom successfully in semi-hydroponics, which is kind of a miracle because this plant it's terrestrial. It shouldn't, in theory, like it. But it really, it stagnated. It wasn't very vigorous. It wasn't doing much of anything. So I just decided, like many of my other plants, hey, one size does not fit all. I'm gonna repot this, and I put it in just classic soil mixed with some leca. And since then, it has grown significantly, and it appears to be putting out a lovely little flower spike. So I'm gonna keep my eyes on this. I'm not quite sure how things are gonna go from here, but it does seem to like it better. Now moving on to number 36 in the collection. This is my Fred Clarkiara After Dark SPO Black Pearl, and just get a load of this. It's so big, and it has grown super successfully. The root system is incredibly vigorous. You can see it's just swirling the container. Big point of difference for both of my Catasetum types. I potted them in sphagnum moss this year as opposed to semi-hydroponics because they do not want to have any remote possibility of drying out, especially when they're active growth. They are so hungry and they are so thirsty. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. This has been such a great grow season. Now, what I want to showcase as well is it has been such a successful grow season because I actually grow it over there in my LED grow light area, that the leaves have actually grown all the way up and touched the grow light. And you can see it's created these little burns, but I thought it was going to be much more destructive and detrimental that it was touching it, but it's just kind of a little bit unsightly, but the plant seems to be doing just fine. All right, jumping back in with number 43 in the collection. This is, believe it or not, an Encyclia tampensis. This is one of the sole survivors from my orchid flask experiment. And it just hasn't had enough momentum for me to be fearful of losing it. So I put it in water culture, and look who else is doing well in water culture. It's just spitting out new roots left and right. So it is really, really amazing that even for only partially established plants, it seems to be an option. So that's what I wanted to share with number 43. On to number 46, my Oncidium Twinkle. This little beauty and this little cutie has been in bloom for so long. You can see it bloomed here, it bloomed there. It's just beginning to drop blooms from its third spike. And at the same time, it is producing another new little growth. So I think that this one is really well established. It's happy. I understand its temperament and its needs, and I have a lot more beauty to look forward to with it. Now jumping to number 48 in the collection, this is my Cymbidium Murasaki Sinense, and I showed you last month. It was putting out what I thought was twin growths, but again, I'm not convinced that they're twin growths because one of them has fanned out into leaves, and this one has remained quite sharp and pointy. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'm just hoping and praying it's a flower spike. Now, Cymbidiums, who knows what they can do in semi-hydroponics? I don't know that this is the method for them, and I am this close to giving up on it. But seeing this, I just hope that it's possible because I did manage to give it a really successful dormancy by just cutting off watering altogether, just like you would do with the Dendrobium Nobile. So if I find that you can successfully do it, I'll be thrilled. I don't know what's gonna happen from here. So that's what I wanted to show there. On to number 49. This is my Burtfield Eileen Meltoniopsis. And this one is probably the only one that I've put in water culture that hasn't given me a strong sign that it likes or dislikes it. Literally nothing has happened. Nothing has changed. It hasn't put out really any new roots, but this plant needs cooler temperatures and elevated humidity, and it's right in a window, so it gets both. So I'm curious to see if this does benefit the plant, but I mean, outwardly, I don't see any signs of change. Now we're gonna jump to number 51 in the collection. These are, as I showed earlier in the video, my wedding day Phalaenopsis. Now I only pulled one down because I didn't wanna pull all of them down from over there, but it's doing so well, it's so vigorous. All of them are prone to branching. So you can see there's a branch there, and then it branches off again here. So that's really, really beautiful. Now the one right next to it is also one of the same of the wedding day orchids. Now you might remember last month I showed you that I accidentally, when I was watering, snapped off the flower spike and I was devastated. I was so upset about it. But now the remarkable thing is you can see where I snapped it off when you come in closer. Do you see right there where the break was? But what happened is pretty remarkable. The plant branched off of the existing flower spike that remained here, and it also created another one at the node just below the break. So whether this flower spike snapped or not, it was still gonna have 3 branches because I just think that that's the genetic makeup of this plant. So obviously it has put the 4th plant that I have kind of on a slower timeline than the rest of them, but it is going to bloom, so that's really, really promising. Now moving on to number 56 in the collection, my Meltonian Sunset. This plant is, as you know, one of my absolute favorites in existence, but I'm so pleased because look, it has 2 flower spikes and both of those flower spikes has 5 blooms. Now this plant has bloomed pretty consistently for me, but I was not giving it sufficient light levels and I don't think I was sustaining proper moisture. So every time it bloomed, it would only give me 2 buds. So that's why I haven't filmed a bloom profile. I knew it wasn't blooming at its maximum or optimal capacity. So it's just so exciting to see that it's doing so well. This should be opening anytime soon. Now I do want to highlight that I recently repotted this into sphagnum moss because I knew I wasn't meeting the moisture needs of the plant. So I just decided to see how much it would like this better. And proof is in the pudding. It really, really appreciates that elevated moisture. Now, when I repotted it, I actually split and divided the plant and I put the other half of it into water culture. And to be honest with you, I kind of thought it was going to be disastrous, but look what it's doing. This plant has wasted no time in throwing out new roots. It hasn't suffered at all. It's been perfectly fine. I don't even see that the bulbs are desiccating. So, water culture also appears to be a viable option for my Meltonian Sunset. So I'm gonna keep eyes on this and see how it progresses, but it seems to be doing great. Now on to number 57 in the collection. This is my NoID Vanda, and just like my Ascocenda, look at it go. This adaptation to water culture, full water culture, has been very, very beneficial. The roots are going nuts. It's putting out thick, well-established roots. And oddly, this one, the Ascocenda seemed to kind of have some die-off on the bottom roots that were in permanent contact with water, but this one never really did. It just seems to metabolize and use the water pretty well. So very, very promising. Super, super excited about that. Now on to number 58. So excited about this. This is my Coryanthes macrantha X Self. I love this plant. I've gotten it to bloom a couple times. But what I really wanted to highlight was I repotted it because I just couldn't deal with soaking. Just like Vandas, I could not keep up with soaking it. So I put it in this basket method. And you might be thinking, a basket method, you do have to soak that. Well, not really. What I've been doing was when I mist my morning plants, I just hold the mister on top of this until it fully saturates. And I am much more consistent watering it that way than I ever was before. And look what the root system is doing. You can see it's really beginning to kind of circle the entire container. It is getting very, very well established. It is super, super happy. So much so that it not only put out this new growth right here, but it has another new growth coming in. And I've never had 2 growths in 1 year off of this plant. So it seems to really like that change of grow method. Now we're gonna jump to number 59 in the collection. This is my Cloesia Rebecca Northern Maccabi. And I'm excited because this is the first year I didn't totally F this up. I don't know why, I got impulsive and I decided I wanted to repot the last one that I had, and it died, which is in one of my in loving memory videos. But this one, when I got it, I also repotted it at the wrong time. So last year's growth was really, really insignificant, and it's pretty amazing it didn't die as well. So this year I waited, I was extra, extra cautious. I waited until the root system was about 3 inches long before I really resumed watering. And just like my other Catasetum types, I put it in sphagnum moss this year instead of semi-hydroponics, and it's doing really, really well. Look how happy it is and cute. I mean, it's a compact orchid, so the fan's not gonna get as big as the others, but I'm just so pleased that it's going well this year. Now on to number 61. This is my Potinara Miki Kobayashi D. Now, I actually have a video that I've been filming over an extended period of time with this one because I divided it into 4. I put 1 in sphagnum moss, I put 1 in water culture, I put 1 in classic bark medium, and I put 1 in semi-hydro. And the results are pretty surprising to me. But not as surprising as, like, look at how crazy this Cataleya is doing. Again, Cataleya is notorious for wanting an extended dry out period. In full water culture and doing fantastic. Just shooting out more and more roots. And a lot of them are growing, I don't know if you can see, they're growing directly down into the water reservoir. This is doing fantastic. I'm so, so pleased. And I'm just so curious to see how it continues to progress. Now we're gonna move on to number 63 in the collection. This is not a happy story. This is my Restrepia cuprea. And to be perfectly honest, this one wasn't doing great before I even adapted it to water culture. You can see this plant is supposed to be green, and I think because I put it under the LED grow light, the light levels were just way, way, way too elevated. So you can see all of them have kind of sunburned and turned that deep shade of purple, which can be good, assuming it's putting out new growth at the same time, but it has not put out any new growth. So it hasn't died yet, but I do think this might be my first loss of an orchid. You guys, I haven't lost an orchid since February of 2019. I've been really on top of it, but I do think I'm liable to start losing orchids again with this experimentation that I'm doing. And this one, I don't know, it's not seeming very promising. Now on to, this is my Cataleya pumila alba, pedunculata. And I am so excited about this one because just like the other Cataleya, it has taken so nicely to water culture. Look at all those new roots. And not just new roots, but it also has a new growth coming in right at the base too. And this is a super compact orchid. It's very, very tiny. I was honestly super concerned about how I was gonna care for this, but having it hovering on an elevated, essentially it's sitting in its own humidity tray with its roots out in the open, and that seems to be doing just fantastic. So that's very promising. Now moving on to number 65, this is my Sergioara Yokosuka story, also in water culture. I'm gonna keep it brief. This is also doing really well. Tons and tons of new root growth, super happy, very well adjusted in the container, seems to really like water culture. And then last but not least, I have my Brassocatleya benosa, and yet again, we have another success story with water culture. Look at these, the roots that are growing straight down into the reservoir. They're just beginning to circle the container. So you can also see this one has a new growth coming in right at the base. You know, it's remarkable to me how many of them are doing so well in water culture, just plants I never expected to fare well in that grow method. So I know this has been a longer recap than normal, but there are just too many interesting things to overlook. So thank you so much as always for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Be sure to support one another in the comment section because I am so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye guys. Mwah.